Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. This week on the program, would you vote to raise your own taxes? You could face that decision in November thanks to an idea from the state's top leaders. And a Texan in the race for the White House calls for stepping back from harsh enforcement measures at the border.
We have a border that is more secure than it's ever been, and we can maintain that security. But what we don't need to do is to be cruel to children and to families.
We go one-on-one with Julian Castro as he faces questions about his ideas on immigration. But we start with President Trump's visit to Texas. He came to the Lone Star State Tuesday for a pair of campaign fundraisers. First stop, San Antonio. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and State Senator Donna Campbell met the president on the runway. The president attended a private event discussing immigration with supporters, but he let reporters in after listening to stories from local officials and ranchers.
Again, they all want the wall. If we had the wall, the good people will not be able, and you'll see them on the other side of the wall. And people can, number one, they won't come because they'll say there's no way of getting through. Right now they think there's a way of getting through. And their people back home never hear about them. They start the walk that they think Houston's, half a mile away, but it's 300 miles.
As part of his push for a border wall, President Trump paints a picture of our country being overrun by migrants, some of whom are criminals. But is that really the case? John Dapkovich went through years of government data to find answers.
President Trump has repeatedly claimed the U.S. is being invaded by migrants coming across the southern border.
They're begging me for the wall in San Diego, you know that, because the people were pouring through in San Diego, going over the front lawns, going into people's houses.
But do the numbers actually back up the president's claims of an invasion? Well, sorta. Newly released stats from Customs and Border Protection show 103,000 people were apprehended at the southern border in March, which is more than double the number last year, but still less than half of what we saw in March of 2000. That year, total border apprehensions hit an all-time high of 1.6 million. But the biggest difference is not in how many people are coming across the border, it's who they are. In 2013, families and unaccompanied children made up 13% of the people apprehended at the border. Last year, it was 40%. So far this year, 45%. But what about drugs? Well, it's kind of hard to find a trend. Seizures of cocaine and heroin have remained fairly steady over the past 3 years. Marijuana is down, but meth and fentanyl are up. As for gangs, of the nearly 400,000 apprehensions at the southern border last year, just 481 were people with gang affiliations, which works out to 0.12%.
While border apprehensions dropped since the historic high in the year 2000, the number of Border Patrol agents has increased. According to Customs and Border Protection, there were 9,200 agents working nationwide in 2000. Last year, there were more than 19,000. The president's visit to Texas led presidential candidate and former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro to hold a rally of his own in the Alamo City. Castro countered President Trump's immigration views, as well as those of fellow Democrats, with his own proposals for the border and beyond. He says he's not afraid to put immigration front and center in his campaign. Castro spoke to our politics reporter Phil Prazen about his plan.
We want to choose compassion, not cruelty, when it comes to immigrants. This president has tried to get us to believe that somehow we can only have a border that's secure if we are cruel to little children and to their parents. I believe that we have a border that is more secure than it's ever been, and that instead of choosing cruelty, we should choose compassion.
Is the overall message that you're sending that we need to accept that there are going to be people that are going to come here and we need to stop trying to stop them?
No, we need to always maintain a secure border, and we have a border that is secure right now. A lot of personnel down there. We have 654 miles of fencing, but what we don't need to do is to be cruel to children and to families. We can choose compassion. So I would get rid of that Muslim travel ban. I would not build the wall. Instead, I would invest those resources in making sure that our ports of entry are as secure as possible so we can catch drug trafficking and human trafficking. And I would strike up a stronger partnership with those Central American countries that people are coming from so that people can find safety and opportunity at home and not have to come to the United States. That's the smart, long-term way to handle this.
When you rolled out your plan, people seem to gravitate towards the decriminalization part of it, including a Republican Congressman, Dan Crenshaw, who would just say, Dems are the party of open borders, period. In this campaign, you're going to get a lot of that.
Open borders is just a Republican talking point. We have a border that includes 654 miles of fencing, thousands of personnel. We have laws that deal with immigration. What I believe is that we can maintain a secure border and also be compassionate.
When it comes to what the process would look like under your immigration plan, you want to split up ICE, and so what would those other agencies be doing in helping people through the process?
Well, we're still, of course, going to have immigration enforcement. We're always going to have enforcement, but that enforcement, I believe, would be more effective if we put those enforcement activities into the Department of Justice and change the culture of ICE.
And so, kids would go to school, people would get jobs, and they'd have to just go to their court dates at the appointed time.
Yeah, and the fact is that in this country, from the late 1920s until about 2004, even though we had a law that made it a crime to cross the border, we actually enforced that as a civil penalty, not a criminal one. Many of these problems that we have today is because we've prosecuted these as criminal offenses. That's why you have family detention the way you do. That's why you have such a backlog in our system and part of this chaos that's been created at the border.
So, of course, the diplomatic relationships and working on the corruption and the violence in Central America. But what other things do those countries need that we can help with?
These countries, they lack safety. So we can help ensure that these countries are safer. They also lack job opportunities. So we need to make sure in a mutually beneficial way, in a way that the United States benefits from as well, that people in these countries can find more job opportunities so that they can stay in their home country instead of having to come over here.
I could see a skeptical person saying this and say, I don't like paying taxes to my government, let alone another one. Do you think that that is going to be a big problem?
Well, I think we should invest in foreign aid when there's going to be a mutual benefit. And the benefit that we're getting here is that this is going to help control the flow of people through the southern border. And so the United States will benefit.
Castro is also using this moment in the spotlight to fundraise. He is far short of his opponents, Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke, and Kamala Harris, who have raised more than $10 million in the first quarter of this year. Castro has yet to release his numbers. Trump's Texas visit also brought a pair of presidential orders aimed at speeding up pipeline construction. How the orders signed in Texas make it harder for communities trying to block those plans.
We know that property taxes are becoming to a level where some folks are being forced out of their homes. And so we're at a crossroads. This is a solution.
Texans want property tax relief, but a new plan to make it happen has some Texans worried about the cost. We'll take an in-depth look at the good, the bad, and the uncertainty of raising the sales tax. And there's new progress in the work to reduce restrictions on hemp and CBD oil in Texas. Why one lawmaker is asking the Attorney General to get involved. Stores across Texas are now selling CBD products, but some say they're operating in a gray area. CBD is known for helping relieve pain and reducing anxiety, but it does come from cannabis plants. But certain jurisdictions in Texas continue to prosecute for CBD, even as retailers pop up all over the state. The confusion prompted State Representative Terry Canales to ask Attorney General Ken Paxton for clarification on whether CBD is legal or not.
Some CBD oil has traces of THC, which would make it a felony. And the law is not clear. There's actually a gray area. And so in some jurisdictions, there's full prosecution and full enforcement of the law as if the CBD contained THC, whether it does or doesn't. And so a clarification from the Attorney General's office would be necessary.
Texas lawmakers are considering several bills to legalize CBD and hemp. And there's been movement on one bill we told you about last week. House Bill 1325 passed out of committee. The bipartisan measure aims to establish a commercial hemp farming program in Texas. The bill now goes to the Calendars Committee to be scheduled for a full vote in the House. And the Senate approved a bill to override local laws that require businesses to provide paid sick leave. We told you about the concerns some LGBT advocates had about Republican Senator Brandon Creighton's bill. They said his original plan could also overrule local non-discrimination ordinances. So Creighton filed a new version that he says narrows the focus just to sick leave. And the bill passed the Senate on a party line vote.
Would you vote to raise your own taxes? You could soon face that decision, and it's a tougher choice than you might think.
Do you own property? Do you not own property? Do you buy a lot of things? Do you not buy a lot of things?
We'll look in depth at the plan and the prospects for raising sales taxes to pay for property tax relief. It's a problem that could cost Texas nearly $250 million. The way the state pays for special education leads to a costly penalty. Now lawmakers are looking for answers as parents look for more help for their children.
The push for property tax reform hit a roadblock Thursday at the Capitol. House members delayed their scheduled debate on House Bill 2. Speaker Dennis Bonnen told House lawmakers they're working with the Senate on the reform. The Senate adjourned for the weekend a few hours later.
It was clear, I think there was a lot of back and forth between the House and the Senate, and I think the determination was let's give it over the weekend to see if they can come up with something that perhaps can come out of the Senate. We've done our job as a House on House Bill 1 and 3. I don't think it's too much to ask for the Senate to do their job and send us over whatever their version of House Bill 2 is going to be on the property tax rate.
House members plan to take up HB 2 again on Monday. The delay comes right after Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and House Speaker Dennis Bonnen announced they're backing a plan to raise sales taxes to help pay for property tax relief. Their plan would raise the statewide sales tax rate to 7.25%. Lawmakers would first have to agree to limit future property tax hikes. Then Texas voters would need to approve changing the state constitution to raise the tax. The plan would create billions of dollars in new revenue, but as Eugen Cho shows us, it's making some Texans worry.
Oh God, on a daily basis. I go eat a lot and I shop a lot. I have 2 kids and I'm constantly shopping.
From school supplies to clothes, many people we talk to say they already pay a lot in sales tax. So if that went up,
it's really hard because that's something you have to pay constantly on a regular basis.
Austin Community College professor Stuart Greenfield explained, lowering people's property taxes hurts local governments and school districts. So he can see how lawmakers would want to avoid that.
In fact, sales tax revenue in 2021, according to the Comptroller's Office, is about the same as local school district property taxes.
Economist Angelo told me every 1% increase in the state sales tax on items like this can result in more than $7 billion in new revenue for the state.
We know that property taxes are becoming to a level where some folks are being forced out of their homes. This is a solution to provide property tax relief.
But Greenfield says this idea could hurt the majority of Texas families.
It would turn out that the only group that would benefit from the replacement would be households with incomes above $150,000.
Increasing the sales tax is not a solution.
Eugen Cho for State of Texas.
For some insight into the proposals before lawmakers, we're joined by Dale Kramer, the president of the Texas Taxpayers and Research Association. Welcome.
Good morning.
First off, tell us a little bit about your organization.
We are a nonprofit membership organization, primarily businesses concerned about tax and fiscal policy in this state.
Mm-hmm. And you've come out in support of this proposal to raise the sales tax and put the proceeds toward property tax relief, but why?
Well, I think there's no question that folks are struggling with their property tax bills. This provides consumers with a choice of am I willing to pay higher sales taxes in return for lower property taxes or not?
How do you respond to the people who say that this plan actually helps the rich and hurts the poor and middle income people?
Well, I think the individual impact is basically going to depend on your own family situation. Do you own property? Do you not own property? Do you buy a lot of things? Do you not buy a lot of things? I think what we want is to make sure that folks understand how the proposal will affect them individually, so that if this is a constitutional amendment and they do go to the polls to vote on it, that they at least vote with as much information at hand as they can have.
You just mentioned the constitutional amendment, you know, that this would be up to voters in the end. Is this going to be a tough sell?
You know, that's a good question. I think clearly at this point the leadership is all out in support of this. We'll find how strong the legislative support is for this over the next couple of weeks. But right now I would say this proposal probably has some momentum.
Now, what makes you think that this proposal will get past voters? What do you think it will take to convince them?
I think a couple of things. Voters are going to have to believe that this is actually going to reduce their property taxes. In the past, they've been promised property tax relief that at best has been illusory to them. Back in 2006, we cut school property taxes by 1/3, but there was no constraint on cities and counties, so they raised their taxes, and as a result, property tax bills went up anyway. So I think this time we're looking at two parts of the puzzle. One is constraint, so that whatever relief is delivered is long-lasting. And then the second piece of that is the relief, which is going to involve higher sales taxes.
Now, of course, the House and the Senate have to agree on property tax relief. The House delayed their vote. What are you hoping to see from lawmakers at this point?
Well, I think as a friend of mine put it yesterday, this was basically a bump in the road, not a roadblock. We will see property tax legislation pass this session, or we'll be back this summer to work on it. Governor's made that very clear. So I think we will see some type of major legislation pass that constrains future tax increases. The question is going to come down to what is the number going to be. I mean, the governor has proposed 2.5%. The House and Senate have previously passed 4% and 6%. As we looked at some of the pre-filed amendments for that bill, most of the focus is on the question of what is that number going to be and how is it going to be calculated.
All right, we'll see if they can come up with a deal.
We'll hope for the best.
Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thanks for being here.
Lawmakers are trying to fix a problem that could cost Texas nearly $250 million. That's how much the state could be forced to return to the federal government after underfunding special education services. This comes as lawmakers face a call to put more resources towards special ed students. Wes Rappaport looks at the challenges facing lawmakers and parents.
It is immoral that one of the most prosperous states in the most prosperous country is not able to provide an adequate education.
2 of Anna Smith's 4 kids are in special education programs. As the state works out a legal battle with the feds, Smith says she and her family have to fight for services.
I can't count how many times that we have had to go, like I call, go into battle mode so we can advocate for my 2 sons.
The state estimates it could be forced to return $223 million in federal funds Texas hasn't adequately matched. We're told the state could pay about half of that to avoid a penalty for 2019, but it's not in the budget right now, which is advancing.
We're asking for lawmakers to consider a budget amendment that will allocate the extra dollars in state funds that are needed to cover the loss in federal aid for students with disabilities.
Beyond that, a bipartisan group of lawmakers want to allocate even more money for students with special needs.
This is not just a special education issue, it is an education issue that affects all of our students.
If we're not funding this area, we're hurting all kids and hurting our state.
The Texas Education Agency says it's in discussions with the feds and lawmakers to, quote, ensure special education services are not negatively impacted. But will Texas act fast enough before the session ends next month?
We still have time. We're running out, but we still have time. And the conference committee, until that ink is dry, we have some room to do some things.
I'm Wes Rappaport for State of Texas.
Any additional changes to House spending would happen in conference committee. That's when lawmakers from both chambers get together to negotiate details from their versions of the budget that passed their respective chamber.
We've ended the war on American energy like never before. Nobody believed that this was going to happen.
President Trump signs new orders to make it easier to build pipelines in Texas. Why it could get harder for environmental groups trying to stop those plans.
When President Trump visited Texas on Wednesday, he signed 2 executive orders aimed at boosting the oil and gas industry. Trump spoke to workers at the International Union of Operating Engineers in Crosby, Texas. He told the crowd that his plan would unleash American energy. The audience applauded and shouted out thank yous as the president signed the orders. One order allows companies to transport liquefied natural gas by rail in special tank cars. The other order makes it easier for companies to build oil and gas pipelines. Under the order, it's more difficult for states to use provisions of the Federal Clean Water Act to block pipeline construction based on concerns about pollution.
My action today will cut through destructive permitting delays and denials. You know about that? You know about delays? Where it takes you 20 years to get a permit? Those days are gone. So that you can get to work producing the energy and the infrastructure our country needs to thrive and compete and to win.
During his remarks, the president called Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush up to the stage to shake his hand. Trump joked that George P. is the only member of the Bush family that likes him. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.